Hi, Adam here with FCP Euro. Today I'm going to be doing something kind of cool. I'm going to be upgrading my front brakes on my P3 Volvo V60 from the smallest 300mm size to the largest 336mm size. To do that, what we'll need is two rotors, brake pad set. I'm going to be using EBC red stuffs, two brake hoses. These are ATE OEM, and a couple of genuine dust shields. So I already had a set of brake calipers off of a V8 S80 P3 chassis, and I was going to put them on, and I thought, well, we might as well just do a video of it and show you guys how to do it. So before we get started, I'm going to show you some of the tools that you're going to need to do this job yourself. So the tools you'll need to do this upgrade are going to be a 19mm to take the wheels off. You're going to need an 18 for the caliper brackets. You're going to need an 8mm, that's going to be for the dust shield. You're also going to need a T50 Torx to take off the set screw on the disc brake rotor, and a couple of extensions. For the brake lines, it's going to require a 13mm line wrench. You're also going to need a 10mm wrench to do the bleeder on the caliper, as well as a variety of tools for just general brake service. That's going to be a bleeder, a hammer to knock the rotor off, some anti-seize, some brake lubricant, some Loctite, medium strength. You're also going to need something to retract the brake piston, a brush to clean off some of the rust that you're going to find down there, a torque wrench that goes up to 200 Newton meters for the main caliper carriers. You're going to need a torque wrench that goes up to 28 Newton meters for the slide pins, as well as a 7mm Allen bit. Of course, if you're doing a job like this, it's always helpful to have an electric impact or a standard impact on hand. It's just going to make things a lot easier. So now that we've taken a look at the tools that you're going to need to do this job, let's get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is basically get these used calipers ready to install in the car. That's going to first involve removing the caliper carrier, and then I'm going to put the brake line on now while it's easier to do. So using a 7mm Allen, I'm just going to break these slider pins loose. As they come out, they'll move towards the inside. So to attach this brake hose, I'm going to be using a 14mm line wrench, and just snug that up so that the flare fitting seats nicely. You'll feel it when it's tight. It'll feel good. First thing we're going to do, obviously, is take the wheel off. Use their 19mm lugs if they're still your OE lugs. Okay, now we're going to take off the 18mm main bracket bolts. You don't really need to do anything else at this point because this whole caliper is going to get removed. All right, with both of these loose, and this is able to come right off, before we do that, we're going to move up. We're going to disconnect the brake line from the body. Okay, with a drip pan underneath it and the reservoir closed at the top so it doesn't help leak out, you use a 13mm line wrench. Okay. So now with the brake line disconnected, I can pull it off of this little suspension clip, undo the last of the rotor, undo the last of the caliper bolt. And remove the caliper from the car. To try to reduce as much brake fluid loss as possible, I'm just going to move this caliper over here and hook it up. Using your 13mm line wrench, go ahead and snug up this flare fitting. And then when you finally get to the end, just give it a good, nice snug down. You don't want to strip out that flare fitting. It'll be a bad day. The way they seat, you don't want to apply too much pressure onto it. The fitting does the work. Now is a good opportunity to go ahead and clean up a little bit before we start putting our caliper together. We're just going to remove the brake rotor by undoing this set screw. So we're going to use a T50 Torx to remove the set screw and take this rotor off. Using an 8mm, we're going to take the dust shield off. Since this is for the 300mm, we're obviously going up to the 336. Make sure that it's fully seated. We're going to hope that these oh, that was actually quite much easier than I thought it was going to be. All right. So I have the larger 336mm dust shield. I'll rest it right there. Put one bolt in. I'm going to use a little bit of high temperature Loctite on here, just because I don't intend on ever taking this off again. Otherwise, I would use anti-seize. Using that 8mm, we're going to snug these up really nice, but we're not going to over tighten them. We're going to let that Loctite do the work here. Make sure the hub surface is clean. Definitely make sure that all the rust is cleaned off and it's free of debris before the rotor goes back on. So here's the larger 336mm. Whenever you're handling a rotor, do your best to make sure that you don't get grease on the rotor face, because that's going to hurt the brake pad bed-in process, which is extremely important when you have new brakes. Using the T50 Torx, go ahead and tighten down that set screw, and that will help it center onto the hubs so that your lugs go in nice and straight without any obstruction. Okay, using some medium strength Loctite, get some on the caliper bolts, the caliper carrier bolts, and move that into position. Tighten the caliper carrier bolts to 200 Newton meters, which is quite a lot, but that is what the specification calls for, so that is what we're going to do. So using a silicone brake lubricant, I'm going to basically get a very thin coating on the area that contacts the slide. I'm also going to apply a very thin coat to the back. This already has a shim on it, so not as important, but just make sure that these little ears have lubricant on them. There we go. All right. Nothing made it onto the brake pad surface, so we're good to go. We'll just go ahead and slide this into position now. So using that same brake lubricant, we're going to now install the two pins. Make sure to clean them up really nice, and go easy on the lubricant. A little bit will do you. There we go. These install using the 7mm Allen bit. We're just going to snug them up for now until we get the torque wrench. Install the dust caps onto those bushings. All right, now install the spring clip. This part is going to end up going into this little ear on the caliper on the inside. It will have a decent amount of tension. So now that we have the spring clip installed, everything is torqued down, we can just do our final sort of checks, make sure that everything is tidy. I'm going to actually move this bushing down so that it fits into the strut right here. Next step is going to be to bleed this caliper. All right, the bleeder is right here, so we just pop this little cap off. It's a 10mm. What we're going to start off doing is gravity bleeding this, just to see if we can get the majority of the bubbles out before we use our pressure bleeder. I'm going to now lower the car down while it's doing that, and open the hood so I can then put more brake fluid into the reservoir. We're using a Motive power bleeder. I'm going to fill it up with a liter of .4 LV, which means low viscosity brake fluid. It's what Volvo specifies for all of their modern cars, most likely because they're designed to operate kind of in polar conditions, and a low viscosity brake fluid helps with ABS function when it's below 0. So up here in the cowling, you'll see access to the brake fluid reservoir. You just open it up like this. Be very careful with brake fluid. It is, again, I want to reiterate, it will mess your paint up. Pressurize the system. So now that the system is pressurized and ready to accept fluid, we're going to move back down to the brake caliper and hook up the bleeder and bleed the system. Using our 10mm bleeder, attach that up here. Put that on there. Just let it rest someplace. And now we are bleeding. See a decent amount of air actually coming out of the system already. When this starts to run clear and there's no more little bubbles in it, we're going to then move to the other side. All right, now that it doesn't look like there's any more bubbles coming out of this, I'm going to go ahead and call this one good to go. Release the pressure in the pressure bleeder by cracking the cap, and very carefully remove the cap. There's a max level indicator in the inside that will basically kind of overflow a little bit. So if it's aligned with that max level, then you're good to go. Lightly putting these lugs on. Once they're on the ground, they will take 80 foot-pounds. So that's how to upgrade the 300mm brakes on your P3 chassis Volvo up to 336. It's a direct bolt-on procedure. All of the other hardware is actually the same. That's the ABS modules, all the other brake lines and everything. So it is actually a fully bolt-on procedure, which is really nice. Keep in mind that we did only show bleeding one side. Obviously, you have to bleed both sides to get maximum effectiveness out of your brakes. And of course, the general bed-in procedure is to just go easy on your brand new brakes for a good 500 miles or so to make sure that you get a good surface coating on your rotors. Thank you for watching. If you thought that this was helpful, definitely hit that like button, subscribe for more Volvo content, and if you have a comment, leave it below. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.